Hello everyone, and today we're going to answer a question that literally nobody asked. Well, it's kind of a relevant question. Can you game? Can you do PC gaming off of an SD card? Now, the reason why we're asking this question is because the Steam Deck is coming soon, and the Steam Deck will support, the two versions will support NVMe SSD. You've also got the base version that does support the the eMMC, the embedded multimedia card device. Now, we don't have that to test, but what we're going to do is we're going to test Jedi Fallen Order because it is quite an interesting game that does tax the storage. There are no loading screens when you start the game. When you transition from area to area, there's no sort of fade to black and then load. Everything is loaded in game in real time. Again, runs on the Unreal Engine 4 as well, so it is a good test for like the texture streaming. Now we should point out we're going to test this on a multitude of drives. We've got an NVMe SSD, we've got a SATA SSD, we've got a mechanical drive, and we've also got a SD card. I've gone for a Samsung Evo Class 10 128 gig NVMe, SD card. So it's kind of typical, kind of cheap to be honest, but it is a Class 10 one designed for recording 1080p at 60 FPS. If you have a phone or a digital camera, that's what it's designed to do. Although that is a write action and gaming is mostly a read action. So what we'll do is we will start off by taking a look at the drives, and we'll take a look at the Crystal Mark ratings. Bear in mind, pay attention to the read. Sequential read is mostly, so we'll start by taking a look at those drives just now. Okay, so on the left we have the NVMe SSD, which is a WD Black SN750. It is a Gen 3 NVMe. It's rated at about 3,500 megabits per second is what it says on the box. So as you can see, it gets pretty close to it. The one on the right is the Samsung 870 QVO. SATA SSD, and again it's rated on the box. It says it has a sequential read speed of 560 megabits per second, so it does get pretty close as advertised. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any real difference in performance there. Interestingly, the footage that you are looking at is just control footage that we've got for the background there. We will get into the tests for loads times, etc. Okay, so for the hard drive, we are using a it's a Seagate Barracuda, not a Western Digital, it's a Seagate Barracuda 4 terabyte shingled platter hard drive. A lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about them, but what I've done is I have deliberately also put in the Toshiba drive, which is a 3 terabyte 7,200 RPM, bit older drive, but the performance is fairly similar between the two hard drives. So we're going to use the 4 terabyte one. Doesn't have very much space taken up, but as you can see, random reads are the Achilles heel of the hard drive, the mechanical hard drive. So we'll take a look at the SD card now, which should be the slowest in theory, certainly. So we'll go take a look at that just now. Alright, so last and least is the SD card. So it is a Samsung Evo 120 gigabyte drive. I am using this, I don't have an SD card reader on my PC, so I'm using a USB Type-C hub that I use for my laptop. It is plugged directly into the motherboard's USB Type-C port. So it's going directly in there. Read speed, Samsung rated it at 100 megabytes sequential read, so 98 is not bad. It was rated at 60 for sequential write, so that's, you know, exceeding the spec at least. So it's all within the spec. There shouldn't be a bottleneck. The USB laptop hub shouldn't really do that. It is Type C, so it should be able to handle the bandwidth. It also has multiple USB ports, and it has an HDMI port which can do 4K at 60 Hz. So I've no real concern about any bandwidth throttling anyway. So let's get to the first part, which is load times. Right, so let's test the NVMe versus the SSD, and weirdly, it ends in a draw. It takes 15 seconds from to load Kashyyyk. So we're loading up Kashyyyk at the ship at the start, and yeah, 15 seconds. A dead heat between the pair of them. That is a bit of a surprise there, to say the least, because you would expect the NVMe drive to win out, but no. Actually, if we look at it as frames, the SSD won by 22 frames. The SSD won by there. So that's a bit of a surprise there. 22 frames is about a third of a second because we're capturing at 60 FPS. I should point out, yes, frame rate and resolution are limited. Resolution is 1080p and frame rate is limited to 60 FPS. The reason for that is fairly simple. We don't want to stress the GPU or the CPU. But other than that, there's not really a huge difference between the two drives. Okay, so as you can see here, we're just going a little run through Kashyyyk, and as you can see, the frame time, you do get the odd little spike, but generally the NVMe and the SSD pretty much the same in terms of performance. Again, the GPU and the CPU are not being taxed because it is just 1080p. We're using an RTX 3080 Ti. I should point out, and we are running a AMD Ryzen 7 3700X, but the frame time spikes are mostly in the same place. As you can see, it's hard to match up the footage exactly, but again, you do get the little frame time spikes. I will move it on to the worst case scenario for both drives, and we'll have a comparison point there for you. Right, right. So this is the point which we're returning, and this was the worst reading that we got because it is loading in the ship and the two NPCs, and it's got to load the interior of the ship. So this was our worst case scenario right here, and as you can see, the NVMe drive drops down to 30 FPS at its worst. It is only for a second or two. I mean, it's less than a little blip on the frame time graph there. But it is showing as 19.3 milliseconds as a frame time, whereas the SSD, the frame rate reading is a little bit higher at 45 FPS, but the stutter feels more pronounced because the frame time is higher. I mean, you can see we're not GPU or CPU bound. Interestingly enough, the GPU has kind of dropped out. 11% usage. The CPU usage is around the same. VRAM usage is a little bit lower. So I'm thinking maybe the NVMe is transferred the data a little bit faster, maybe, because the VRAM is 5.3 versus 5.5, so there's not much of a difference. The CPU is running a little bit faster there. Interesting there because it's dropped out completely, and I think we are storage bound there because we're not CPU bound. The usage is kind of the same. So that's interesting. So we'll move along to the mechanical drive now and the SD card. Right, so the mechanical drive, same loading screen into Kashyyyk. So the good thing about Fallen Order is because you can reset the enemies, they're always going to be in the same position. So that means we can do some accurate testing. Takes a little bit longer. It's about twice as long to load. Takes about 29 seconds. That is up from 15 for the SSDs, the NVMe and the SSD. But it's not too bad, really, if you think about it. Not too bad in terms of performance there. Right, so with the mechanical drive, the performance is pretty much the same. It doesn't really affect the game's performance. One of the things that you do notice about the mechanical drive is the frame spikes. They're not any higher, but they do last a little bit longer. You can see here it's not much as we move into a new area. But one of the things that it does do is you do get a little bit of texture pop in here and there. It's not too bad. It's nothing too egregious. I think we finally figured out that you can end this charge and just let this go instead of just slowing it down all the time. So that's one of the things I learned doing these multiple runs. This is a good little area here. You can see little one or two little frame spikes in the frame time there. It was the same for the SSD. There's not much of a difference. It's not as bad as the PS4 and the Xbox One versions where you got stoppages. The game actually would stop dead. and the frame time would just hit 0 milliseconds because it wasn't rendering anything there, or it would go to sort of 1 second or something like that. But yeah, as you can see, we move from one area to the other. A little bit of a stutter there, nothing major. As we move into the new area, it's streaming in textures, and again, it's loading in the enemies. The enemies' locations are always the same. These stormtroopers are always here. We can swing on that vine, which we failed to do so. Yeah, so again, you can see the performance is good. Again, we're not pushing the GPU and CPU. The stutters are generally caused by storage. I wondered what that thing was on the ground there. It's a grenade that the stormtrooper threw at me. I haven't played this game for a while, so we've got a... Oh, that's the other stormtrooper's dead. So we go through here, and we always fought the Dark Trooper. Every run was the same. We just kind of went through that, and again, we'll just skip ahead to the worst case scenario. So as you can see, 43 was our lowest recorded frame rate, with a frame time spike of around sort of 26, 27 milliseconds as the ship loaded in. Again, it was this point that gave us the lowest reading here. Again, not too bad. It does persist a little bit longer. Because again, it must be loading in the assets, and again, it has to load in the NPCs as well. So we let it run on a little bit, and you can see it goes right back to the 16.6 milliseconds that you get. I did let this run on a little bit. We'll show you a little bit more footage, because most of it is the same, to be honest. You get that little spike there again as you open up into it. So I decided we will go... we'll show you going to a different planet on the mechanical drive. We'll head off back to the first planet in the game. So this is why we mean it's quite a test for the hard drive, because there is no loading screens between planets. So we're leaving Kashyyyk. We're going to head over... I can't remember what the first planet in the game was, but we'll head over and we'll show you that on the hard drive. You can see there is a few spikes as, again, we go up into space and we, again, go into hyperspace. And then we'll head over to, I think it was the first planet in the game. I can't remember what it was called. Or the first planet you get after you escape. So a few little spikes here. We'll have to take our seat before the planet loads. And we'll get the sort of transition phase into the new planet. Here, sit in your chair for landing. And now it's going to kind of disguise it. You can see there... we've got a 700 millisecond spike there, so that you don't get that on the SSDs. I should point out it is a lot less. It is a little bit longer of a spike there, and it is again, again as the planet loads in here. But other than that, this is the non-gameplay, so it's not really affecting us very much. Again, you can see a little frame time spike, but then we're right back to 60 FPS again as soon as we come out here. A couple of spikes here and there. Other than that, there's nothing else. So let's move on to the SD card. Will it run? Will it boot on an SD card? Who knows? Let's find out. Okay, so this is the surprising thing. Despite it being significantly slower than the SSDs, it only takes 4 seconds longer for it to load. 19 seconds was the load time. And that's not too bad. So that isn't too bad. And you see there is a little bit more, texture pop in there. The characters kind of, kind of loaded into place there. Just on there. So is it playable? Is it a stuttery mess? Does it run well at all? The one thing you do get is you can see a lot more texture pop in than the mechanical hard drive. But other than that, performance is pretty much the same. Like, it's just the same. I mean, so yes, the answer to your question is, can you run a PC game on an SD card? If you were expecting it to be, textures half-loaded, I honestly thought it would look like Mass Effect on the Xbox 360. But honestly, yeah, it's pretty playable. So yeah, if you buy a Steam Deck with the 64 gig eMMC drive, this may fit on it. It is 51 gigabytes. It took 45 minutes to get this to run, to copy it across. I just copied it in Origin. You can move the installation, but again, the little frame time spikes when we transition into a new area, but yeah, they're not there for a prolonged period of time. The game doesn't freeze at all. I did the same run on all things, and yeah, it's playable here. I did manage to catch the vine there, which was good. And I am improving my saber skills because I'm doing this part over and over again. Still getting hit by stuff. I dodged the grenade that time there. But yeah, it's fairly, fairly flawless. Hurry up and kill yourself. There you go. Shooting at a Jedi is suicide. It's kind of suicide. But yeah, the frame time is pretty excellent, as you can see. Little stutters here and there, but yeah. So if it can run at 60 FPS, if the hardware on the Steam Deck is up to it, then yeah, the SD card. So the eMMC is rated. The current spec for eMMC is 400 megabits per second sequential read. This 4 times what the SD card is. So yeah, if the hardware's up to it on the Steam Deck, it should be able to run. I did say that with Jedi Fallen Order that you may get to install it on the eMMC because it is 51 gigabytes. So it depends how much space the operating system takes up, because bear in mind it is going to be 64 gigabytes, which I don't think is enough for the base model of the Steam Deck. But definitely if you've got an NVMe SSD, that was a big spike there when we charged at the Dark Trooper there. Oh, getting our ass. Oh, we're winning. Got my ass handed to me. I didn't show you the the NVMe one because I really struggled. There you go. Push them away there. So we did this little run back and forth in every version. Also did the load between planets. But as you can see, going through here on the consoles produced massive pop-in. And yeah, we didn't run through it just there, but there's a little bit of texture pop-in, but there's nothing. It's just the top-level texture. It reminds me of those Unreal Engine 3 games that loaded from Xbox 360 disc drives. You remember Gears of War 1, Mass Effect 1 was quite bad for that back in the day. But yeah, it runs fine. It's nothing like that. That Stormtrooper has failed to kill that other little bug thing. Let's kill the Stormtrooper with a bit of a force leap at it. Come here, get over here, little bug. And die. I've got my Kashyyyk poncho on, and I've got another skill point. This is a good grind, actually, for a skill point. So we're going to run all the way back. I'll show you the entire thing. We might as well do that, because, again, for the longest thing it took was to transfer across, because the write speed isn't great on the SD card. So it took 45 minutes to transfer the 50 gigabytes. It's around, I think it's 51 gigabytes. It's around that. So it did fit nicely on the SD card. But you can see here we're going through. We'll look for texture pop-in as we go through. A little bit there with the lighting there. You did notice it a little bit. A few frame time spikes here or there. We'll take a look at the lowest frame rate when we get to that point, which is the point where you're going back and you're transitioning. I think because it does load a little transition towards the ship here, so we're trying to sprint as fast as we can just to push this texture pop in. We're not going to save or anything like that, but yeah, it's fine. It's playable, certainly playable. It's no less playable than the NVMe SSD. Which was kind of surprising. Maybe we should try it on a laptop drive. Maybe. I've only got external laptop drives, so I'll maybe try it on one of them just to see if we can recreate the situation. I do have the PS4's original hard drive that we could reformat, because I put a terabyte in the PS4. I might do that and see how well it runs. So we're getting to the transition point now. Right, so as you can see, this was the stutter point, really. The frame rate does go a little bit lower for longer, but other than that, yeah, it's pretty damn good, actually. 52 FPS, I think it's down to like 49. It's not the lowest. Like the NVMe drive had the lowest recorded frame rate. That's why we're not using like recorded frame rates. We're just showing you the stutter, because the stutter lasted longer, as you can see there, than the NVMe SSD, because it's having to load in the ship again and its contents. And again, what we'll do is we will go to another planet. We'll go back to the starter planet again. Again, as we go through here, a little bit of pop-in on the ship there, but nothing major there. Again, you got the two NPCs there. It has to load them in. So we'll head there. I can't remember the NPCs' names. It's been a while since I played this. So what we'll do is we'll again show you the transition point for the planet. Right, so we're back in the ship, and we're going back to the first planet in the game. Doesn't really, I don't know if is this the loading screen? Because this bit feels longer. I mean, it's nice and smooth, but I think it does feel a bit longer in hyperspace. So we're sitting in our chair now. But yeah, let's see how it goes. Yeah, not too bad. Better than the mechanical drive, I would say. That spike there is, not too bad again. We get the texture pop in, a little bit of pop in when we landed the ship there, but other than that, it's pretty good. So it doesn't affect performance. So yeah, if you want an answer to the question, can you run a modern PC game on an SD card? I didn't really try. I mean, we could have tried other games like Cyberpunk or well, GTA 5 might have been a good candidate, but GTA 5 will not fit on this SD card because GTA 5 is bigger than 119 gigabytes. So this game fits, and this game is fairly modern. It was 2019, so I mean, it is quite a test for the drives. It really struggled on consoles with their laptop drives. We'll maybe try that. We'll try the laptop drives. So we'll head back to Kashyyyk. When you go back to the planet, I take it builds up a cache because the thing is not as bad. But yeah, apart from a little bit of texture pop in, nothing like Mass Effect again or like Gears of War. This is an Unreal Engine game. It does run Unreal Engine 4. This game, so again, it's it's pretty impressive. There's a little bit of texture pop in there when we left the planet there, when we were leaving. I can't remember what this planet's called, but we're going to Kashyyyk. Gonna hang out with some Wookiees in Kashyyyk. But again, little bit texture pop in there, but it's not too bad. You notice it when you run, like sprint from end to end. But yeah, it runs fine. Again, VRAM usage is fine here. We're only running 1080p. CPU usage is barely. That's why we picked such a low resolution and frame rate, because I didn't want to stretch the GPU. The 3080 Ti is, it's fine running at this. A little bit of pop in there on the trees. But other than that, it doesn't affect performance, and it just doesn't affect, the gameplay. So everything's fine. I've seen worse. Like, we've seen a lot worse with texture pop in there. It's still loading a little bit there as you come out of the ship, but other than that, it's fine here. We'll go for a little run down here and see the walker that's crashed there. And see, a bit of the grass popping in there, and yeah, it looks like the high resolution asset for the walker took a little bit of time to pop in. There, so we'll run all the way through to the other point. But yeah, so you don't get that on the NVMe drive with the pop-in. But yeah, you can game on a mechanical drive. You can game on an SD card. Why not? If the Steam Deck can run it, it'll run fine. So there you go. Yeah, there you go. A bit of texture pop in there. The low resolution texture had loaded, but then the high resolution one pops in a few seconds later. But anyway, that is all for this video. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again soon. And goodbye.